Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of Real Estate Investing with Stephen Young here at the Young Realty Academy. And I want to teach you today about a question I'm asked all the time. I can't believe how many questions I get about this. Should I buy or should I rent? It is the question I've been asked probably the most in my entire career about what is the right answer. And the very quick answer is they're both correct, but it depends on what you're doing. It depends on where you're going, what your goals are, what you want to do in life. And I'm going to answer all those burning questions in this episode. Should I buy or should I rent? So, should I buy or should I rent? It is a question I've been asked forever, and my entire career. At the end of the day, a lot of people come to me because I've positioned myself in the marketplace. I've cornered myself to work with investors, to give the right advice, give the sound advice, and I can only deliver that advice because I myself have become an investor in real estate. 15 years ago was the first thing I did getting into this business. And at the end of the day, from my personal experience of investing in real estate, you can see some of my properties behind me. I have learned over the course of the years that at the end of the day, you need to rent real estate if you're going to live in real estate. If you're going to invest in real estate, you need to buy it, of course. So the question becomes, is your home an investment? It comes down to two decisions here. Do you want to rent? Do you want to buy? And what it comes down to, for me personally and always, is going to the client and saying to you, what is it that you want out of life? Do you want to retire wealthy? Do you want to live a life of freedom and luxury? Do you want to travel? Do you want to be stuck to one city for the rest of your life? Like, what is it that you want to do? So you personally have to answer all these questions, and you have to figure out from yourself, how are you going to go about doing that? Now, at the end of the day, we've been sold by the banks, by our family, by peers, by friends. When are you buying a house? They think it's an investment. And at the end of the day, it's really not an investment. We're going to go through some detailed information. I'm going to go through some numbers. I'm going to give you an example of what the difference is between buying and renting. And what we're going to get into is we're going to get into a few things. We're going to get to a chart by this gentleman, by Robert Shiller, who's a famous economist. He talks about, he goes over the last 100 years, the value of someone's personal home. We're going to talk about some of the confusion in the marketplace and the media saying you should buy versus rent. We're going to talk about some certain things about pricing, and people are priced out of the market, which to me, in my opinion, is one of the best things that could ever happen to people who are being priced out of the marketplace. So don't be afraid if you're renting, if you're a millennial, if you are older and trying to get into the market, or you've been on the sidelines waiting the entire time to get into the marketplace. At the end of the day, there's never a right time to get into the marketplace, in my personal opinion, because at the end of the day, I don't think home ownership is a proper investment. One, it's not an investment. But two, I don't think it's an investment that you need to worry about so much. There are social aspects and sort of pressure from probably within yourself that you think you need one, but at the end of the day, you really don't need one. You need a goal, which is important. But at the end of the day, to get to where you want to go, to have the house of your dreams, you're not going to get there by buying a home and then paying off a mortgage over a certain period of time, and then hopefully you can stay there and enjoying it for the rest of your life. But that, to me, that's a bad plan. It's a bad strategy. And I'm going to show you the alternative, because at the end of the day, I can't give you my personal take or assessment on the answer if I don't give you an alternative. Because at the end of the day, if there's no alternative, then I'm just like the rest of the media, just saying, do one or the other. And most of those answers are very skewed from somebody who's a homeowner or from someone who's a tenant. Me personally, I'm a tenant. I happen to rent in a home that my company owns, one of the properties that we own, but I personally pay rent to that company. If my company did not own that home, I would still be renting that same home in the same neighborhood, because I like the neighborhood. It's good for the kids, good for the family, it's good for everything we need. It's convenient and the price is right. And we've been there for a long period of time renting. I've been renting since about 17 years old, but I've also been a homeowner. Where the differentiation becomes is, I don't buy homes, I don't buy condos to live in. You got to remember, a home is a consumer good. It's no different than you going out and buying a loaf of bread, and then each week you take off a slice of bread, and at the end of the month you're going to say, well, I have no bread left here. Well, at the end of the day, your home is no different. You're living in it. A lot of people confuse an investment with the actual living, but at the end of the day, it's a consumer good. You're not going to live in your car. You're not going to buy a car to live in, and everyone knows how bad an investment a car is. But a home is also the same thing. So don't view a home as an investment. So Robert Shiller who is literally a Nobel Peace Prize winning, Nobel Prize winning economist. He did a chart back in 2014. It's about 6 years ago. So he studied the housing market after the Great Depression back in 2008 and the big crash. And he said over the last 100 years, since 1913, the home ownership, the value of home, if you account for inflation, has actually zero. It's flat. You have not made money in 100 years of home ownership. Now people are like, well, that doesn't make sense because the value of a home in 1913 is obviously less than it is in today's dollars. Yes, but accounting for inflation, what you can buy today is no different than what you could have bought in 1913 with the same amount of money relative to inflation. Now that being said, people don't use inflation. They say, well, I bought for a low number and I sold for a high number. It's my house. Look what I did. And a lot of my clients come to me in their mid 60s, late 60s, early 70s and saying, look, Steve, I lived in the same home for the last 30 years. Now I want to sell it, and that money is my retirement. But again, which is not a bad strategy. And I tell people all the time, to answer your question, should I buy or should I rent? You first have to answer, what is it that you want to do? If you are not interested in investing, if you are not interested in growth, if you're not interested in a lot of factors that go into long-term sort of sustainable wealth at the end of your lifetime, or if you want to grow wealth, if that's not important to you, then I would say definitely buy a home as early as you can and pay that off for the course of 30 years or 40 years, whatever your mortgage happens to be. The reason why I tell people that, because it is technically forced savings, and I think that's where a lot of people confuse that as an investment, because over time, a lot of people say, well, like I bought it for, let's say, $200,000, and I'm retired, it's now worth $1 million, that's $800,000. Yeah, but what did it cost to get you there? And I don't think a lot of people take that into account. We're going to talk about that today. I'll give you some examples. At the end of the day, if you look at the value of, real quick, I know it's sort of going back and forth here, but if you look at the cost of mortgage lending real quick on your home, bankers love this. And I think home ownership has been a banking idea, because at the end of the day, the people who profit the most from home ownership, especially for the masses, because most people cannot afford to pay these homes in cash, has been the banking system. And I think it's probably a marketing tool from the bank to say, you should be a home ownership, the white picket fence. They build up the dream and say, look, we'll finance your dreams for you. All you got to do is pay a small little fee each month called the mortgage, and we'll, over the course of your lifetime, you could pay it off and take as long as you want. But as long as you pay it, you get to keep the house. That's sort of the way you got to look at it. When it comes down to it, there's a study done back in 2008 on this. Anyways, they talk about the value of mortgage and an interest. So if you look at it, it says the interest payments will tack on an additional 100% or more to your loan value. So for example, you bought a house, let's say you bought $1 million home, right? The home of your dreams, it's $1 million. And you said to go to the bank and say, look, I want a 30-year amortization mortgage, which means you have 30 years to pay off that loan. Well, that home, over the course of interest, will tally $1.16 million just in interest payments alone, making the total cost of the home to you, just for the lending, is $2.16 million. So you're like, well, look, over 30 years, maybe the home appreciates. Well, not according to Robert Schiller. Over the course of 30 years, of course, over 100 years, if you take into account inflation, you're actually zero. The value of the home has not gone up at all. Now, there's people who do short-term flipping, which is what I do, but that's more of an investment strategy. It's speculative, it's not always guaranteed, but it's, at the end of the day, that's how I use real estate. I use real estate to get short-term bursts of capital investment appreciation, and then over the course of long periods of time, I also have rental properties, which that capital appreciation goes into to then sort of to account for the appreciation over time, plus the mortgage pay down. So if somebody else is paying down my mortgage, I don't really care the cost of it because I'm not paying for it, but somebody will pay for that value of the home. And most big investors, they'll have big mortgages, 30, 40, $50 million over the course of 40 years, but the tenants will pay that down, but at the end of their lifetime, they'll have that paid down by someone else, and that's what real investing is about. And that's what I want to talk to you about. If you're going to be a renter, we're going to go through some numbers here. Just follow me real quick. I'm going to show you a breakdown of numbers, home ownership versus renting. I'll be right back. Okay, so let's look at a breakdown of the expenses here. On the renting side of things, so the average rent in Toronto is $2,500 per month. But for this example, we're going to scratch that out and we're going to make it $3,500 per month. And you'll understand why here in a second. So on the rent, you're going to pay on average $3,500 per month. Approximately $200 in insurance as a tenant because you have less liability and less contents insurance. So it's much cheaper than ownership. So it's $200 per year and about $1,200 for utilities for the entire year, for a grand total of about $43,400 for the year as the cost of renting in the city of Toronto. Now, that being said, the out-of-pocket expenses to get that lease is going to be your first and last month's rent, which on average, on this example, is $7,000 out of your pocket. Now, let's look at the cost of home ownership. Now, keep in mind, you own everything about this house. You own the roof, you own the doors, you own the windows, you own the walls, you own the floors, the plumbing, the electrical, everything. That's yours. That's your responsibility. And we'll get to that here in a second. So the average cost of a home is over $1 million in Toronto, but for easy numbers, we're going to say it's $1 million to purchase a home here in Toronto. Now, to acquire that, most people do not have the cash, and they're going to have a financing, and on average, a mortgage, we're taking a lot of averages here for this example, and for easy numbers, but you're going to use 20% down payment, which is $200,000 per year. Your mortgage is going to be $800,000 a year, which, by the way, is going to cost you approximately $3,500 per month, which is why we changed the rent to $3,500 per month. I want an apples to apples comparison. Now, the cost of the actual home itself to get, we're going to get to here in 1 minute, but the ownership cost is significantly higher than being a tenant, and that's always has been the case and always will continue to be the case, because again, you own everything about this property, the land, everything, right? So you got to take care of the lawn, you got to take care of, if there's a pool, you got to take care of the pool, whatever it is, it's your responsibility. So the annual cost here is same as the rent in terms of $3,500 per month, which is $42,000 a year. $2,000 per year is probably going to be your property taxes. $6,000 for property taxes, $2,000 for your insurance costs, which is significantly higher than being a tenant because you have more liability. You're going to have $1,200 for utilities and about $5,000 for upkeep. And if you don't think you're going to upkeep your house, good luck. Year one, you may not have to, but year 2, 3, 4, 5, it will build up over time. And furnaces are not inexpensive. Roofs are not cheap. Lawn care is not cheap. Broken windows aren't cheap. All that adds up. So we're going to use about $5,000 per year sort of average of upkeep for the home. So for a grand total, annual total, about $51,200 to account for your average expenses for an annual basis on a $1 million property. Now, that being said, so your annual cost alone is significantly higher, including property taxes, which is another $6,000 on top of that. So for a grand total of $57,000 a year, more so than being a tenant here in Toronto, which is about $43,000 per year. Now, I didn't talk about out-of-cost expenses. So to acquire that property up front year one, you're going to need at least a $200,000 down payment on a $1 million home. To buy the property, you have taxes to pay when you get the property. It's called land transfer taxes. That's $32,000 here in Toronto. And you're also going to have legal costs as well. You need a lawyer to buy a home. So that's $2,500 right there. So grand total year one out of pocket, you're well into excess of almost $300,000. And when it gets down to it, year one is going to be challenging. Year two, though, you go back to just the normal course of cost, which is going to be, it's outweighed almost $20,000 from home ownership versus being a tenant. Now, that being said, those are just the costs. Now, it doesn't talk about mobility. It doesn't talk about the ability you can just take up and leave. It's challenging to sell homes sometimes if you do it on a short-term basis. So all that has to take into account the decision of whether you should rent or you should buy. For me, renting is the smart choice. But more on that. And we're back. Now that we talked about the brass taxes of home ownership versus being a tenant in a property, and the benefits of being a tenant versus being a homeowner is obviously one, it's a big cost difference, huge cost difference year one. Year two and year three, et cetera, it goes on and on and on. It really doesn't get any cheaper to be a homeowner. But again, we're here to answer all your questions, and one of the biggest questions is, well, I'm just wasting money as a tenant. Well, we're going to talk about that here. We're going to go back to Robert Shiller, and Robert Shiller also in his study when he talked about, the 100-year case study about home ownership with using inflation as his historical averaging, home ownership actually was flat. There was no actual gain in home values over that course of time using inflation. Now, when it comes down to mortgage lending, he also talked about the benefits of being a homeowner versus being a tenant, and he talks also about what is the big difference, and the biggest difference is when it comes to the actual cost of homeownership over periods of time with a mortgage. Now, when it gets down to a mortgage, the interest cost on a mortgage is going to be 100% of the value of that over the course of a 30-year amortization mortgage on average. Now, a lot of the time it's actually higher. Most people in the US and in Canada, they'll refinance their home 1 or 2 times, sometimes more over the course of their lifetime. So they're actually paying down much of the principal. And when it gets down to it, the principal cost is really what you're trying to get to, because I hear this all the time, well, I'm just throwing away my money. The first 5 years of your mortgage, if you, most mortgage terms are about 5 years, and you renew them 6 times over the course of a 30-year amortization mortgage. And then you'll pay down that mortgage over time if you don't renew or refinance at any point in time. Now, the first 5 years, you pay almost 95% of all your payments go to interest payments. So the number we used on the interest payments of $42,000, a large percentage of that actually goes to interest, and you don't pay down much principal. So the argument that rent is being thrown away is no different than throwing away money on interest payments to the bank on a mortgage, in my personal opinion. But if you only had interest to pay, I would understand the argument, because you're building value over time, over a very long period of time. And when it gets down to it, to me, if you look at all these, the people who study this, there's people who point out that, the home is not the right value for you. It says here that home prices keep going up and up is sort of the myth in most North American cities. When it gets down to it, home ownership doesn't actually go up. But what you need to do, and we want to talk about the alternatives here, if you're going to, and this is what I tell all my clients, if you're going to want to own a home and go against the grain of what I'm telling you to do, and you want it regardless of what I tell you in advice, then what you need to do is pay down the mortgage as soon as you can, as fast as you can, and then you have to not refinance the property. And generally speaking, if you're going to do that, you're going to be your largest asset that you're going to pay down over a period of time. The alternative for me, I think the option that everyone needs to do is, if you're going to be a tenant, only be a tenant if you have the interest of investing in real estate at an aggressive pace. Because there have been many, many studies done that home owners do have a higher net worth by the time they retire than tenants do, because over the period of time, most tenants don't save money. Home ownership, to me, is the only benefit is that it is a forced savings account. You have to pay the mortgage or the bank's going to foreclose on you. There's no question about it. And if you don't believe me, you can go and try it yourself, but they will foreclose, period. They want their money. And at the end of the day, you're going to say, okay, if I'm going to be a tenant, how do I get into investing in real estate? Well, it's really quite simple. There's so many options out there, especially in today's marketplace. Real estate investment trusts are fantastic. You can reach out to us. We have funds you can invest in. There's so many things that we could point people into. You're going to do flips like me in the background here. These are fantastic strategies for you to get into as a tenant, but only be a tenant if you use that investment strategy and you want to build sort of a large net worth over the course of your lifetime. When it comes down to being a home owner, again, the only benefit is a forced savings account. That's all it is. The big disadvantages far outweigh the positives. And the big disadvantages are that money you've saved up over time is not liquid. You can't use it. You can't just sell your garage when you need like a new car, or you can't sell something as part of the house. You're going to sell one room because you need some cash unlocked. It doesn't work that way. It's either all or nothing. So one, you're not very mobile. Your cash is very illiquid, and it gets to a point in time where most people are not necessarily cash strapped, but they don't have enough cash to get into proper investing. So I would, there's a number of things I would do if you did want to buy a house. And one is, if you're going to do it super early and pay off your mortgage as soon as possible. Alternatively, I would be a tenant and invest in real estate aggressively, and only be a home owner if you can pay for that home in cash and it doesn't account for more than 10% of your overall net worth. Jeff Bezos famously just purchased a home in LA for $163 million. To him, that's something like 1/20th of his overall net worth or something like that. So to him, it doesn't make a difference. It's no different than you going out and buying, let's say you're earning $100,000 a year and you go out and you buy a $1,000 car. It doesn't make much difference to your lifestyle. So that's where cars and liabilities differentiate from me in terms of assets. If you pay for them in cash and it doesn't affect your overall net worth so much, then it's okay. And that's where home ownership for me lies. And home ownership cannot be more than 10% of your overall net worth. So if you want the home of your dreams and it costs you $3 million, you better be aggressive in real estate investing and get to $30 million and then buy the house that you want to live in and sit there just to let it do nothing for $3 million. That's what I would do. That'd be my advice to you. So it's no different than someone coming to me at a university and saying, "Hey, Steve, I have student debt. I don't have a job yet, but the job I'm getting is going to be paying me maybe $60,000 a year as an entry job a year, and I want to go out and I want to buy a Lamborghini, a $300,000 Lamborghini." And home ownership to me is no different than that. That's a very silly thing for anybody to do, and any parent or advisor or friend or confidant would say that's not a good decision. It's not a good financial decision. If you're only making $60,000 a year and you want to buy a $300,000 car, which really doesn't give you money, doesn't return you money, it's not an investment. Over the long course of time, that $300,000 goes to basically zero, and you can't really sell for much at the end of the day. And the alternative between a car and a home is there is retained value at the end of the day. But the difference of the financial leveraging and the difference with the strapping of the debt, it's no different than you going out and buying a car when you don't have the money to buy a car. You also shouldn't be buying a house if you have to finance it either. So for me, my advice is rent, and if you're going to be a renter, you're going to make sure you're going to be a very high-level real estate investor. And if you don't want to be an investor, buy a home, buy it low, buy it early, finance it, pay off the debt as soon as you can. And that is my advice, and that is my answer to whether you should buy or you should rent.